Good evening, resistors. Today is September 19th, 2011, and you are tuned in to the WideShut Webcast on Resistance Radio. I'm your host, Keelan Balderson, and you can find all of my work at wideshut.co.uk, and for everything Resistance Radio, it's resistradio.com. As always, a lot to get into this week. The ongoing charade that is the Libyan invasion, essentially Al-Qaeda, the National Transitional Council have been given a seat in the UN, which really isn't surprising to me, considering the UN was created and is controlled by the Anglo-American globalists who fit the definition of terrorism quite perfectly. The calculated use of violence, or the threat of violence against civilians in order to attain goals that are political or religious or ideological in nature. This is done through intimidation or coercion, or instilling fear. Well, who starts most of the wars, and who has the biggest fear-mongering propaganda arm in the world? Well, it's those that operate within the Anglo-American Empire. Who didn't get a seat in the UN this week? Well, Palestine. The United States on Thursday confirmed it will veto any bid by the Palestinians to seek statehood recognition in the UN Security Council. And believe it or not, some people still think Obama is anti-Israel. Yeah, give me a break on that one. Americans are finally taking to the streets and are fighting back against the bankers, as we've seen thousands of citizens have attempted to occupy Wall Street and, I guess wanting to bring the bankers to justice. Of course, the police, who also have to live in our bankrupt society, still continue to protect the criminals by blocking off the street and removing people who were trying to camp out on Liberty Street. And the irony of it being called Liberty Street obviously is not lost on me. There's no liberty in America anymore, folks. And just on that whole action going on in New York, there's one video on YouTube that a lot of you have probably already seen, but it's perfectly symbolic of the class divisions right now in the Western world. You have this image of these protesters. They're marching down a place called Zuccotti Park, heading to Wall Street, and they pass, I guess it's a restaurant or a hotel or something like that. But you have all these yuppies and bankers and businessmen standing on this balcony as people march past, and they're just looking down at the unwashed masses as they march past in their little protest. And you just see their faces, they're smiling, they're taking photos of the lower classes down below. And they seem to be quite amused by it all, as they stand there in their ivory towers. Probably sipping champagne, which was bought with bailout money, no doubt. So it's all quite depressing. But there was one uplifting story that I want to get into quickly today, that shows how some sectors of society do look out for each other and are trying to come together and help things progress in our society. And this comes from The Guardian. Just a little story, but it's just nice to hear. Undeterred, protesters walked laps around the area before holding a people's assembly and setting up a semi-permanent protest encampment in a park on Liberty Street, a stone's throw away from Wall Street and a block from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. 300 spent the night. Several hundred reinforcements arrived the next day, and as we write this article, the encampment is rolling out sleeping bags once again. When they tweeted to the world that they were hungry, a nearby pizzeria received $2,800 worth of orders for delivery to the encampment in a single hour. So even if people can't make it there or are not up to protesting, people have still been showing their support by just simple things like buying the people there a pizza. So I thought that was quite nice to see. And to all my brothers and sisters across the pond, I'm there in spirit. Unfortunately, I can't get a flight over to New York and join you, but I 100% support what you're doing. And put it this way, if I was alive in the 18th century, I'd have gone, 30 minutes up the road to the original Boston, where I live, and I would have happily sailed across and joined you to kick some British ass. It's just a shame things didn't turn out quite how the Founding Fathers wanted, but I would have been there. And something I found funny in a recent Luke Radowski We Are Change video, he was over here in the UK asking people, different questions on the street. And one of his questions, it was the last one, it was a bit of a joke. He said, who whooped Great Britain's ass in such and such a battle? And obviously the answer was the United States during the revolutionary period. And I know it was just a laugh, but people were kind of picking Britain as their football team, like, you can't say that to me, you're dissing Britain. If he asked me that question, I'd have been like, good on America. Who the hell wanted to be ruled by the monarchy and the bankers? But people have this, even, going back all the way back then before they were even born, they have this blind patriotism. And as far as bankers, the same battle is still happening right now. This is what it's all about. Maybe we need to start a new United States, maybe a United States of the Moon. Let's get a spaceship and colonize the moon. But this time, let's come up with some more original names, perhaps. Not New York. Let's come up with something new. But we've got to do something. We've got to leave this place because it's getting really ridiculous. What is next? I don't know, but it's got to give at some point. Is there any islands anywhere that, maybe if we can't make it to the moon, are there any islands anywhere that aren't occupied right now? Can we buy an island? I don't know. They're probably all owned by some rich globalist somewhere. But anyway, before I start rambling about going to the moon or whatever, I did want to start today with an interesting contrast in stories out of the mainstream media about the 10th anniversary of 9/11. Because I read these two stories within minutes of each other. I think they were just, on the Facebook front page as everything comes down. And it just struck me how we're having an amazing awakening and recognition of the corrupt system on one hand, and then on the other hand, the tyranny and the dumbing down and the propaganda is also racing ahead. We've almost got two camps going on at once. And the first story was about this football star who is basically being investigated by his team because he posted a tweet about 9/11, basically saying, I don't think it was terrorists, inside job kind of thing. And then on the other hand, we have Charlie Skelton in The Guardian, writing a fair article about a 9/11 truth conference that he goes to. These two parallels can come out on the same day and be so completely different in their stance. The first article, Liverpool Football Club order probe into young star's tweet claiming the 9/11 atrocity wasn't a terrorist attack. I'll post that in quickly. A Liverpool Football Club player is being investigated for inappropriate tweets about the September 11th attacks in New York, it has emerged. Striker Nathan Eccleston, who has almost 40,000 followers on Twitter, wrote, I'm not going to say attack. Don't let the media make you believe that was a terrorist that did this. The 20-year-old made the comment on Twitter on Sunday, the 10th anniversary of the attacks in the United States. He then continued, "RIP all 9/11 victims. My thoughts are with their families and all of those that were affected by this tragic accident," Eccleston wrote. The comments were removed from Twitter, and Eccleston then tweeted, "If you don't like what I have to say, unfollow me." Which is fair enough, free speech. If you don't like what he has to say on Twitter, then go watch somebody else kick a ball. Liverpool Football Club has now launched an investigation into his Twitter activity. You know, because you can't use Twitter for anything other than making pointless, oh, I'm cooking tea right now. The club takes this extremely seriously. Senior club officials have informed Nathan Eccleston that we are undertaking an investigation into the circumstances surrounding these postings. Instead of investigating a football player's tweet about 9/11, how about we investigate the attacks themselves? Because 6 of the 10 9/11 commissioners admit that the investigation and their report was a whitewash. That alone should warrant some kind of new investigation. But to me, this story, it's scary. It really is worrying. For having an opinion that I would estimate millions around the world also hold, including thousands of architects and engineers, whistleblowers, ex-military, former government officials, foreign governments, journalists, pilots. For having that opinion, your career may be in jeopardy. That's a scary thought. That's the thought police. This is a 20-year-old kid whose job, let's face it, is to kick a ball. And obviously he's a good athlete. I'm just saying, I wouldn't put all my effort into being a football player, but that's just my opinion. But anyway, but you want to launch an inquiry into a political opinion that a football player posted on Twitter. That's ridiculous. I guess democracy and free speech is only allowed when you vote for or if you believe in what the establishment want you to. You are free to believe in what we tell you. And look, this guy didn't say nobody died. He didn't say there were no planes. He didn't say it wasn't a tragedy. He just said it wasn't a terrorist attack. Meaning he's looked at the evidence and come to, frankly, the only reasonable conclusion that elements within the US helped the whole thing along, whether accidentally or as I believe, deliberately. When you have, for example, a CIA program to fast-track visas to unqualified militant Islamists so they can come to the US, and 15 of those alleged to have hijacked the planes went through this fast-track process, that's one example. Or when we have firefighters saying, get back, the building's coming down in a minute. Or reporting that they heard explosions. You reach a point where you realise that it's just a fact. At the very least, elements of the US establishment were involved. And to deny somebody an opinion based on facts, or to make out that it's outrageous to believe in such things, let's call a spade a spade. It literally means free speech is dead in this country. And even if you've got your head in the sand and you think bin Laden orchestrated 9/11, you still have to concede that free speech is dead. So then you've got to ask yourself, what kind of country do I live in where people can't say what they want to say? You can't pick and choose what people are allowed to say. Free speech doesn't mean you censor somebody else's opinion because you don't agree with it. Or you launch, stupid investigations just so your football team doesn't look slightly different from the establishment's line. Just because you're worried that you're going to lose a sponsor somewhere. There's a lot of rich Muslims, maybe they'll sponsor your football team if you're so worried about it. And this also kind of ties into this bizarre sort of conclusion that people come to. And obviously articles like this are partly to blame for this. That if you think 9/11, for the lack of a better term, was an inside job, then you're with the terrorists. And you get this sort of this mantra a lot, that if you don't think who the government says did it, then you're somehow as bad as the people that did it. I'm getting tongue-tied, but you understand what I'm saying. And it's so nonsensical to me, because if you spent just 10 minutes looking into 9/11 truth, whether you think, we're right or wrong, ultimately, those active in the truth movement are looking for justice and peace. They're non-violent. They're anti-war. They don't want millions dead in foreign countries. Those on the ground in New York, they help the victims groups. They do other charity work. At what point does that mean they're Al-Qaeda? And I recently experienced this firsthand. I just applied for a passport within last week, and I got a few tongue-in-cheek comments from friends, oh, they don't let terrorists have passports, Keelan. If you're darker skinned in this photo, you might look like Al-Qaeda. Just little things, and it's a joke and I laughed at the time. But basically what they're saying, even jokingly, is that I'm some kind of terrorist sympathizer. The only terrorist sympathizers I know are our governments who, let's face it, for the last 30 years have worked directly with Al-Qaeda. The Soviet-Afghan War in the 80s, the Balkans in the 90s, and now they've just given them a seat in the UN. But of course, if I was to explain this, by that time, it would have been information overload. They'd have switched off. It would have been time to change the song on their iPod or something. But back to this contrast. I then jumped over, after reading this article about this football player, I jumped over to The Guardian, and then I see an article by Charlie Skelton, who really is about the only mainstream journalist, other than perhaps people like John Pilger, or who's the other guy who did The Power of Nightmares? Adam Curtis. About the only person really in the mainstream that's asking the important questions right now. And personally, I'm not a big fan of Skelton's work. I think he has that sort of comical way of writing where, I don't know how to explain it, but to me, his style of journalism, if somebody who, is on the fence, if they read his stuff, it's almost like, oh, it's just a big joke. I think people might dismiss him. But at least he's getting the quote meme out there. At least he is in the mainstream spreading some of this information. How the World Changed by after 9/11 by Charlie Skelton. I won't read it all, but basically he attended this conference in New York. I think it was in New York, it might not have been. But, he was over there for the 10th anniversary. And this is what he says in the last paragraph. I found myself blinking back tears for the second time when Ray McGovern read out a poem in his polished CIA Russian about a mother mourning the loss of her child. This thread of grieving ran throughout the conference. Wayne Madsen grieved the loss of shoe leather journalism. McGovern mourned the death of the Fourth Estate, while Webster Tarpley, spoke of the hollow memorial at Ground Zero, the two abysses, the reflecting pools or voids, as they're often called. He sees these memorials as an appropriately empty vision of nothingness, no ideals, and nothingness at the heart of America. But we have to do something. We have to do something, even if that something is simply to Google Cass Sunstein and start from there. Begin your own cognitive infiltration. Google Vigilant Guardian or Able Danger or cross-check Al-Qaeda. Begin digging, begin thinking, and stop believing. And that's the point, isn't it? Society has almost found themselves a new religion. But instead of, believing blindly in a man on a cloud, they believe in the mainstream media and the government. And the propaganda runs so deep. Cookie touched on this the other week, but somebody recently brought out a 9/11 colouring book for children to help educate the kids about the terrorists. But it's full of errors, errors that even they've admitted in the mainstream. One of the pages shows Bin Laden using his wife as a shield, which we now know didn't actually happen, if the incident even happened at all, but we've been over that before. But I guess it's just the US equivalent of the CIA producing textbooks for children in the 80s, teaching, young Afghans to count using images of bombs and tanks. It's propaganda at its worst, aimed at children. But as I say, we've hit this divide of being awake on one side and then sort of being forced to sleep on the other. It's almost like we've hit a crossroads and we've gone in two different directions. To some people it's so blindingly obvious, and to others it couldn't be anything other than the official story. And I think we're probably going to get more Charlie Skelton style coverage in the coming years as more and more people kind of wake up to this sort of thing. But at the same time, I think we're also going to get more and more draconian kind of reactions to these beliefs, like we've seen with this football player. Thankfully, I work for myself, so I don't really have a boss or peers or whatever that might, grass me up or whatever, or get, paranoid about what I'm saying, or run to the media, or, whatever, or try and get me in trouble. I don't know how anyone else, how you deal with this stuff at your work. Do you tell your colleagues about the kind of things you look into, or do you just shut your mouth and get on with the job and get your paycheck? I mean, it's a difficult situation. But it wouldn't shock me if we saw a rise in sort of snitching on each other in the workplace. Going to the boss and saying, I've got some concerns about such and such a person's opinions, because the poster above the water cooler says, if you see something, say something. This is the way we're heading. And somebody else who's wrapped up in all of this is former Homeland Security Chief Michael Chertoff, who of course makes money from the body scanners and was immediately paraded out in front of the mainstream media after the, quote, underwear bomber. If that's not a conflict of interest, I don't know what is. He's invested in the body scanners and then goes around promoting them while the public are being told Al-Qaeda is trying to bomb planes. Bit of a conflict of interest there, in my opinion. And of course, the incident itself had false flag written all over it. Long story short, some higher-ups in American intelligence basically ordered Muttalib onto the plane without a passport. But nobody bats an eyelid at that. Nobody bats an eyelid that Michael Chertoff is making money off the body scanners. Because he wouldn't do anything like that. He's former Homeland Security. He's got the country's best interests at heart. Doesn't matter that he's making a bit of money on the side. But anyway, Chertoff was actually over here in England for the 10th anniversary of 9/11. He was given a speech at Chatham House, otherwise known as the Royal Institute of International Affairs, basically Britain's version of the CFR. And you can see the video on YouTube. Let me find the link. Chatham House actually has their own YouTube channel, in plain view. Not that anyone looks at it. Half the videos have just got like 100 views or whatever. That's the kind of ignorance that we have in society today, that a group like Chatham House can have a YouTube channel and pump out all this bullshit and nobody even cares, nobody even looks at it. And this is what he said in his opening line, which you can watch on that video. All my public life, I've heard of Chatham House rules. People say, oh, we're going to do Chatham House rules. So I thought, great, I'll get to go to the original Chatham House where the rules were formed, and imagine my surprise when I find out they're not operable here today. And of course, all the people in the audience chuckle at his wonderful joke. And for those that don't know, Chatham House rules are basically the blueprint, really, for how all these think tanks and talking shops like Bilderberg and the CFR work. It's how they keep things secret. It basically means whatever you say here will not be recorded, we won't keep any minutes, and nobody here is allowed to repeat any of what anybody says. And that's generally how these elite, think tanks and groups operate. And he basically, so he basically makes the joke, oh, we're actually going to speak on the record today, ha 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 ha, I better make up some bullshit then, wink wink. And I'll quickly bring up this week's New World Order quote, because I like to bring in a New World Order quote every week to try and show people that no, it's not something we made up. There's tons and tons of quotes of people talking about it. But this is this week's that ties into Chatham House. In an official 75-year report, Chatham House member Lawrence Martin summarizes the purpose of the Institute. 75 years ago, the founders of what was to become Chatham House believed that a new world order was coming into being, and that to help its realization, they had devised a new and fruitful way to improve understanding of international affairs. In other words, get all the elite in a room to talk about how they're going to carve up the world, while putting out pro-One World Order articles in our journals. That's basically how it went. I used to actually subscribe to the CFR's, Foreign Affairs Journal, which was just utter bullshit. I couldn't keep it up, waste of money, but it's all just like, New World Order's great, the Anglo-American establishment, terrorism, we gotta have a new currency, and it's just ridiculous, but the yuppies buy this stuff and just eat it all up. And yeah, you're right, Chertoff does look like Skeletor. If there's anyone that's a reptilian shapeshifter, it's Chertoff. Where are we? Yeah, this is what Chertoff, remember, who's getting paid by the security companies, this is what he said. This is his own summary of what he wanted to talk about. Conventional ideas of criminal prosecution are no longer up to the task. So I guess that's why they assassinated bin Laden instead of trying him in a court of law. Or maybe it's because they had no evidence that he was involved in 9/11. But anyway, he continues, looking back 10 years, where are we? Well, I would argue that strategically, the concept of security is no longer relevant as a binary system between war and law enforcement. It's now about a spectrum where the tools you use to combat terrorism have to be all the tools of national power. That includes the military, that includes law enforcement, it includes, in fact, elements of civilian agencies like the health authorities. And then he blabs on some more. And basically what I took away from this speech is that he wants centralized security at every level for everything. And we're already seeing it with the runaway TSA at airports, now trying to get in the NFL, at stadiums, on buses and trams and things like that. In this speech, he also brings up the homegrown threat, which according to leaked documents a couple of years ago, basically means Ron Paul supporters, returning veterans, people that call themselves libertarians, people that want freedom and actually believe that the Constitution was a good document to live their lives by. They're now the terrorists. He also had a nice rant about the cyber terrorism threat, which his pals at Mossad would know a lot about. Obviously, Chertoff is a dual Israeli citizen, dual Israeli and US citizen. But my point is, Israel know all about cyber terrorism, don't they? Because they created the Stuxnet virus and are at the forefront of this whole technology. So, of course there's a cyber threat. Israel is at the forefront of it. But something that did worry me a bit when listening to him, he kept talking about the possibility of a biological or chemical attack. And he brought up the anthrax attacks as an example, which of course were not Al-Qaeda, as they tried to present at the time, as they were all running away with this Al-Qaeda thing because of the 9/11 attacks. But actually, the anthrax came from Fort Detrick, which is an American military establishment. So basically, you could argue another inside job. But I found it funny how Chertoff tried to explain it away. He brought up the anthrax attack, and then he realized, oh crap, that wasn't Al-Qaeda. And this is what he said. He goes, the attack was launched apparently by a single individual who had an agenda, which I think he was trying to warn people about the problem. So in his mind, this guy that went nuts and spread this anthrax around, he was just trying to warn people that Al-Qaeda might want to get some anthrax at some point. Ridiculous. More like this person was perhaps trying to scare people so Chertoff and his buddies could come in and get more funding and more control. But he did seem quite certain about a biological attack. And he said it back in 2009, he said it back in 2008. So in knowing this guy's history, he probably wants a biological attack. He's probably got investments in the cures to various biological, diseases or weapons or whatever you want to call it. He's probably sitting there waiting to wheel something out, going, come on, I want a biological attack, I can make all this money. So personally, I'd take this as a warning. If he's repeating this mantra of a biological attack, maybe we should be looking out for a biological attack. But anyway, that's enough of Mr. Chertoff. There's plenty online about that bloke. Not on Wikipedia, obviously. There's barely anything about him on Wikipedia. I wonder why, but we're going to jump forward because time's running out. This show always goes too quick. Other 9/11 news. Rachel sent this along earlier, actually. Lloyd's insurer sues Saudi Arabia for funding 9/11 attacks. A Lloyd's insurance syndicate has begun a landmark legal case against Saudi Arabia, accusing the kingdom of indirectly funding Al-Qaeda and demanding the repayment of £136 million it paid out to victims of the 9/11 attacks. The Brighton-based Lloyd's 3500 syndicate, which paid $250 million compensation to companies and individuals involved, alleges that the oil-rich Middle Eastern superpower bears primary responsibility for the atrocity because Al-Qaeda was supported by banks and charities acting as agents and alter egos for the Saudi state. The detailed case, which names a number of prominent Saudi charities and banks, as well as a leading member of the Saudi royal family, will cause embarrassment to the Saudi government, which has long denied claims that Osama bin Laden's organization received official financial and practical support from his native country. The Saudi embassies in London and Washington did not respond to requests from the Independent for a response to the allegations. The 9/11 Commission report, America's official report on the attacks, found that there was no evidence that the Saudi government or senior Saudi officials individually funded Al-Qaeda. And I'll hazard a guess that that might be because George Bush likes to kiss members of the Saudi royal family on the lips and has intimate ties to Saudi oil. I think that might play a little role in that. I'm not too sure, but maybe. And of course, they already had the pre-planned invasion of Afghanistan to worry about, so it doesn't matter about any Saudi connections because they already had their agenda in place. And obviously, it's possible that Saudi were involved. I think, the evidence is there. I'm not saying that Saudi Arabia are solely responsible for 9/11, but we have to follow all the different sort of links here. It wasn't just an inside job. I don't like that term. It's too simplistic. There's lots of different layers and factions involved, but it wasn't just Al-Qaeda. And to me, if you do any amount of research, there's no evidence that bin Laden was behind it all. But we've been over that to death on this show. I'm going to quickly go to a song and gather up some more notes, and I'll be back to talk about a bit of a scam that's been running within the alternative movement that I think you guys probably are aware of it or wouldn't be duped by it. But it came to my attention the other day. I'd heard about it before. But I'm just going to play a quick song and then come back and fill you in on what I'm talking about. And I'm looking for the higher ground. Money makes the world go round. Money just bring me down now. Okay, welcome back to the WideShut Webcast. I'm your host, Keelan Balderson. And in the last 10 or so minutes that we got today, I just want to bring up a website. I've just dropped it in the chat there, called the Global Information Network, that's been doing the rounds within the you see, we need to come up with some new terms here. The conspiracy movement, the truth movement, the alternative movement, whatever you want to call it. This thing's been floating around these past few weeks. I did hear about it a year or so ago, just completely dismissed it, but I got a message from somebody sort of touting how amazing this thing is through YouTube, and I basically responded to this person. It was a little bit harsh, but I basically told him, what do you take me for? You think I'm some kind of gullible twat or something? And they replied like, blah, blah, blah. I thought you were smart. What's wrong with you now? Blah, blah, blah. But this website is a scam, okay? And I think most people listening now will understand and will read the first page and just run a mile. But as I say, I was recently asked to join this website, and what immediately sort of set my alarm bells off was that this person had pasted in not just the direct link to the site, but something called an affiliate link. And for those that don't know what an affiliate link is, it's basically a link to a website or a product or some kind of service where it contains a small code that can be tracked by the company. And each person that's involved in this case, in this website, they'll have their own affiliate link. And basically, when somebody joins the website through that link, the person who promoted the link will receive some kind of benefit, be it commission on a product, they'll get a cut of whatever's being sold, or they'll move up some kind of system or whatever. And so that itself got me a bit wary. But this is what the Global Information Network, this is what they pasted into my YouTube message when they sent me it. The Global Information Network, GIN, is a multi-form foundation, whatever that means, organized in the country of St. Kitts and Nevis, so basically somewhere where the authorities can't investigate them. It was conceived by a group of individuals from around the world who are the highest-ranking members of several private societies, associations, clubs, and groups. I mean, do they need a thesaurus or something? Just going through a list of the same word. Whose membership has been exclusive to the privileged elite class of the world. The individuals who encourage the formation of GIN, the GIN Council, include billionaires, celebrities, royalty, former heads of government, prime ministers, presidents, world leaders, scientists, some of the most powerful, influential, educated, and successful people on Earth. For obvious reasons, these individuals will always remain anonymous and do not have any official association with GIN. GIN is an organization where the average person can gain access to the same secret information that up until now has been the exclusive privilege of the elite class and only to members of the above societies and groups. By allowing average people access to this secret knowledge, it is the hope of GIN that individual levels of personal responsibility will increase, more people will become empowered, depression, powerlessness, poverty, hunger, and slavery will diminish and over time cease to exist. A worldwide global shift will occur where the masses will stop looking to government or corporate entities to solve all problems and, blah, 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 blah. But basically, folks, it seems that this website's positioned itself, it's a typical looking Ponzi pyramid type scheme thing, as Tom says in the chat. But they're latching on to the popularity of the sort of alternative movement, and they're throwing out these words like elite and secret societies and we're going to save the world and all this thing, but it's basically just a big sales page and they want your money. And I used to be involved, I'll freely admit this, I used to be involved in internet marketing a bit before I woke up. I used to do a few shady things, trying to sell bullshit to, ideas of how to make money to other people who want to make money, and teaching people how to sell ideas about making money. Just ridiculous, just a big circle that you go in. I was also involved in something called cookie stuffing, which is where you basically illegally put cookies on people's systems so that it looks like they click through onto some other service or whatever and you get paid and all this stuff. Not the greatest time in my life, I admit, but I know a thing or two about dodgy internet stuff, and it just looks like a big scam. I mean, I'm sure you can all see that, but it is floating around the alternative movement. They're saying things like celebs and billionaires are involved. They promise that you'll gain wealth, but they also promise we'll save the world and end poverty and all this thing. Here's another line. This is from the actual website. The goal of GIN is to provide a safe haven where members can build mutually beneficial long-term relationships to help one another better achieve their respective goals. Kind of sounds a bit like Freemasonry there, doesn't it? Some kind of old boys club where you all help each other out. But they're targeting the growing online conspiracy audience because they know it's popular right now, and they obviously want to cash in on it. And whenever a website is saying that you're gonna gain wealth, and we're gonna bring you freedom, and we're gonna fight the new world order, unless they tell you point blank what they're gonna do and how they're gonna do it, then run a mile, because they're just hooking you on a fishing line to reel you through loads of hoops And once you've spent your money, you're going to be desperate to get it back. So then you're going to go all over the internet putting your affiliate link out so other people get duped. And because they realise they've got duped, they're going to start promoting it. And it just becomes, at the end of it, the bloke runs off with your money and you're left with nothing, basically. And here's a list of the topics they say they'll help you with. The law of attraction. Where have we heard that before? It's within the boundaries of this alternative movement. Money-making opportunities, investing, real estate, stocks and bonds, commodities, offshore banking, asset protection. Then they slip in another one, natural remedies and cures for illnesses. So they're kind of, it's like they're promoting all the things that naturally people want, wealth and power and stuff, and mixing it in with the conspiracy stuff. But let me get to the point. This website, I have it on good authority, is owned by a man called Kevin Trudeau. And this guy's kind of wormed his way into this circle in the last few years. He's been on the Alex Jones show. He's interviewed David Icke because he does his own show. He claims to be an elite whistleblower, but essentially he's a con artist. Check out his Wikipedia page. I'll paste it in. Kevin Trudeau. And this is just a line from his Wikipedia page. Trudeau's activities have been the subject of both criminal and civil action. He was convicted of larceny and credit card fraud in early 1990s, and in 1998 paid a $500,000 fine for making false or misleading claims in his infomercials. And basically, his mantra now is that, he was only targeted because he was trying to tell the truth and spill the beans about the elite, and this is why they have all these lawsuits against him. He didn't really do anything wrong. He knows the truth. Just listen to him and give you his money. But folks, he's just a con artist. So if you ever hear the name Kevin, don't listen to me. Obviously, go out and research this. Check out this website. Look into him. But if you ever come across a guy called Kevin Trudeau, please don't get sucked into his scams. Basically, that's what I'm saying. Quickly before we go, shout out to Tom Secker. You can check out his new 7/7 film, 7/7 Crime and Prejudice, which you can find on the 7/7 Archive YouTube channel. I'll hopefully be getting Tom on in the next few weeks to discuss the new film. Hopefully it will prompt me to pull my finger out and get my own new film out on 7/7. So be sure to check that out. In 30 minutes, you can check out the Blue Bus's reality check show. That'll be at 9:30. But from me, that's about all I've got time for this week, folks. So I will catch you next week.